I'd like to welcome everyone to our June 25th, 2020 virtual meeting of the City Council. Tonight's council meeting is the sixth council meeting we are conducting using communications media technology as authorized by the executive order of the governor during the current pandemic. We appreciate your patience and assure you that your City Council remains committed to providing the public a fair and reasonable opportunity to participate in council meetings. We sincerely appreciate your continued understanding as we work through this temporary manner of conducting meetings. To tonight's meeting participants, as the presiding officer, I request the following. I ask that each council member or designated staff member request that they be recognized by me before speaking. I'll do my best to quickly recognize and call on you. All participants should use the mute function and only unmute yourself when you seek to be recognized to speak and while you are speaking. Please remember that this meeting is being broadcast to the public, and therefore we request that you eliminate any background distractions as you may have at your location. Prior to the council taking final action on any agenda item, applicants or members of the public who are present in the public access area will be recognized to address the council. Applicants and members of the public who have pre-registered to address the specific agenda item through communication media technology will be recognized to address the council. And email or written statements that have been timely submitted will be read into the record. The normal rules I have stated earlier regarding public comment still apply. Thank you for your cooperation and efforts to ensure this council meeting is conducted in the best interest of the city of St. Cloud. With that, I call this June 25th, 2020 meeting to order. We'd like to have our invocation. I'd like to recognize Edgar Mendez, pastor of the Eastern Avenue Baptist Church, to lead in our invocation, after which I'll ask that we all stand and engage in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Mendez.
Good evening, St. Cloud. I invite you to join me in prayer for special blessing of wisdom, discernment, and guidance. Let us pray. Father, you stand above us. Therefore, you see things from heaven's perspective, and we need that. But you are also with us, always available to guide us and to press upon our hearts the right course of action for our city. Father, I pray your blessing over St. Cloud, over our community and citizens, over every project and every plan. I pray for this meeting. It is true that we face unprecedented difficulties. Give us a heart that seeks the right solutions. As we acknowledge the difficult times, we also acknowledge the fact that we are not without hope. We believe that even amid trying times, with your help, we will press on and we will rise above. Our prayer today is for discernment, that we may be wise in the steps we take. It is not always easy to find the right answer, but we pray you help us to always seek to do that which is right. Help each one see the importance of our responsibilities and also the privilege we have of using what is placed in our hands to be of help to one another, to build each other up. Guide us to a place where we learn to sacrifice, where we learn to listen and to comprehend, where loving our neighbor is not just a religious mantra, but it is a value we uphold. Let us work with compassion, tethered to an unwavering devotion to justice and equality. God bless our efforts. God bless our homes and families, our community. God bless St. Cloud. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. Could you join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll have our roll call. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Here.
Councilmember Cooper?
Here.
Councilmember Askew?
Here.
Councilmember Trace?
Here.
The next item is presentations, but the item on the agenda, I believe, has been pulled. Is that not correct, Mr. Sturgeon?
That is correct.
The presentation will be by Ms. Holtkamp on the lakefront drawdown and cleanup.
Thank you, Ms. Hola. Ms. Hola. Kemp, if you'll please
Yes.
share your presentation at this time. Stephanie?
Yes, can everybody hear me? Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on the East Lake Toho drawdown project. As you can see on the screen, I hope everybody can see that, but on the screen is actually the lakefront project that we were trying to accomplish. So there's 56 acres that we sprayed and burned. We did the aerial spraying north of the retention ponds at the lakefront park from Mississippi Ave to Georgia Avenue. That was completed in March of 2020. We were supposed to burn the beginning of April, but due to COVID, it wasn't completed until this past Tuesday, June 23rd. So we do realize that there's some mechanical removal of that vegetation that is still needed, and I will be meeting with the contractors on Monday and Tuesday of this coming week to talk about that. Then also the Chisel Park dredging project that was approved at the last council meeting started on June 23rd of this week and is expected to be completed the beginning of August of 2020. FWC's portion of the project, which would be the scraping of the aquatic vegetation north of the Chisel Park boat ramp, has been completed. So that's good. And I will show you a picture after that. And then currently we're in the stage of nature taking its course and the water level is starting to come back up. And then hopefully everybody can see this on my screen. On the left is a picture that was taken back in February before the scraping that FWC started. And then on the right is a picture in May when the scraping was almost completed. So you can see where the littoral zone has been scraped. Then it also benefited a lot of the neighboring or the neighbors on the lake. They were able to clear out their canals to get to the lake. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. Stephanie, on the picture on the right, why is it that they didn't clear the vegetation all the way down to like further into the water? Is that?
Yeah, so they were only concerned with the littoral zone. That's why the picture on the right, the vegetation to the left out towards the lake is good for fish and wildlife habitat. So that was the good non-invasive vegetation. So they left that. So once the water comes back up, I will get a drone picture like this so you can actually see it's the good vegetation that they left.
Okay, and so they've done every single thing that they obligated to in the public meetings at this point?
Yeah, for the exception on the west side of the lake, they sprayed, but they have not been able to burn like us. So, you know, that portion of it, I'm not sure where they are with the burning. Just like us, we were affected by COVID. They're affected by COVID, and forestry is going to try to work with them. But as the longer it went from us to spray to burn, you know, the harder it is to get the result you want.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I brought this up at our workshop last week, was because I wanted I was at a meeting and I spoke with Mr. Soto about this project, and he was saying how was it going, and did we need any help from him, and of course we were asking him for need to come from the entire council. That's why I brought it up last week, because I had heard that they were not burning on the west side, which was upsetting to me because that's what was presented in all of the public meetings. And I feel like it's kind of a letdown to the community, like the people that supported the project. I mean, they're expecting certain outcomes. So when I brought it up to the city manager, I thought he said we were going to do it. Is that not the case? Then also, I had said we'll reach out to Darren Soto about it. So just kind of wondering where we are with that.
Yeah, so we burned. I mean, forestry, they were allowed to burn starting on Monday for us. I can't speak to FWC if they were allowed to burn for FWC, but for us, they were allowed to burn on Monday. They were there Monday and Tuesday, but it's not the desired result we wanted to have. And the representative from Division of Forestry is more than willing to come and speak to that matter. But they did the best they could. But for us on the east or for the south end of the lake against Lakeshore, I mean, they did what they could. But considering COVID happened in this, we were 2.5 months behind when they were supposed to burn. So they did the best they could. That's why we're going to have to still mechanically remove some of the vegetation. The west side, that was an FWC project, so I can't speak to that.
Right, but I guess this is more for the city manager. That's why I brought this up to him last week. So when we discussed it, I thought you were saying the city was covering it, but maybe there was some confusion about what area the city was covering. And then we also talked about writing a letter to Mr. Soto asking for his help to get the project completed with FWC. So where are we with that? That's more for the city manager than you.
That's okay.
We got some kind of issue, Deputy Mayor. I can barely, so I'm going to try to answer that. We never wrote a letter to Soto because it was my understanding we were going to take on that. We were going to actually hire a contractor to come in and clean those areas that weren't burned. And that's what I relayed to the council at the workshop.
Okay, but that's not.
Right. That was not council direction to write a letter to Mr. Soto because I thought we were going to take care of it internally. And then they called back and said they could burn Monday and Tuesday, which I sent an email to the council advising that.
Right, but I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but the west part is not being burned.
That is correct.
So that's what my intention was when we talked about it, and then we talked about writing a letter to Mr. Soto, and I thought we had 4 people say yes to that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see if we can get Soto to get interested to try and clean up the rest of this. It looks like it's about half done or a quarter of it's done and the rest of it's still not done. When I look at the canal of Chisel Park, the canal and goes south, there's nothing done there. I drove down there a couple of days ago and it didn't look like they'd done anything to the south side of the canal at all.
Okay, so
That's my objection. We still need to get a lot of work done and we're running out of time. So we need to jump on it and get it done. Whatever it needs to do, let's do it. I don't care if the city needs to do it or if the FWC needs to do it, but somebody got to finish up this job. Thank you, sir.
is there any objections to what he has asked or recommended from any of the council members? I don't hear any objections.
No, I think that was my point. Sorry.
I think the confusion started with I wasn't aware on the west. I was assuming the project was holistic of the entire lakefront. So I think that's where the confusion started. We'll definitely reach out to Mr. Soto's office in the morning.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So Mayor, is that council direction to write a letter and follow up?
Yes, sir. It certainly is. I have no objections to that.
What about of talking to somebody at FWC too and see about if they can get to the west side a little bit more too?
Mr. Sturgeon? Is that
Yes.
something?
If that's direction from the council, I'd be glad to take care of that. I'll have Stephanie do that, and I'll take care of Mr. Soto's office.
Are all of you in favor of that?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. You have a consensus, Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Holtkamp, do you have anything else for us?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This brings us to our citizens forum. Any person who desires to comment on any item not on this agenda is provided this opportunity to address the city council. Each person is requested to complete a signing form to be provided to the presiding officer prior to or as soon as is practical thereafter the person addresses the council. Madam Clerk, is there anyone in the chamber or online to speak during the citizens forum?
We don't have anyone for Citizens Forum at this time in the chamber or that has signed up.
Thank you very much. The next item is our consent agenda. The next portion of tonight's meeting is the consent agenda, which contains items that have been determined to be routine and non-controversial. If anyone in the audience wishes to address a particular item on the consent agenda, now is the time and opportunity for you to do so. Additionally, if staff or members of the city council wish to speak on a consent item, they will be given the same opportunity. I'll ask, first of all, is there any of our council members that's wanting to speak to an item on the agenda, consent agenda? Madam Clerk, is there anyone in the chamber or has requested to speak to the consent agenda?
There's no one in the chamber and I don't have anybody signed up for the consent agenda.
All right. Then we'll have discussion and a motion by council regarding the consent agenda. Ms. Matheny.
Just want to have one.
Oh, Mr.
I just
Trace.
had. Sorry. On item G, I just want to applaud staff for getting that grant in and approved so quickly for the $2 million for the storm improvements in the Illinois Avenue area.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? Any other comment? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Askew and a second from Councilmember Cooper. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Councilmember Trace,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The next item are public hearings. Madam Clerk, will you read item number 1?
Final public hearing for ordinance number 2020-20. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, known as the St. Cloud Housing Assistance Program and Trust Fund, providing for renaming Chapter 18 Economic Development Incentives, heading to be known as Community Development, providing for insertion of the Affordable Housing Assistance Program and Trust Fund, providing for renumbering of the Economic Development Incentives section, providing for an establishment of the Affordable Housing Assistance Program, providing for the establishment of the Local Housing Assistance Trust Fund, providing for the Local Housing Assistance Plan, providing for administration of the Local Housing Assistance Plan, providing for the creation of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, members, powers, and duties, and review procedures, providing for conflicts and providing an effective date.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Mr. Anderson, you may be recognized.
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. I'll be making the presentations tonight for most of the public hearing items. This first item, of course, is Ordinance 2020-20. Let me just share my screen with you. There we go. So this first item is the second and final public hearing. This item was heard at our last City Council meeting on the 11th, and it's related to establishing the Housing Assistance Program and Housing Trust Fund related to receipt of the State Housing Initiative Partnerships funds. As I mentioned last meeting, because we are an entitlement city, we are now eligible to receive funding from the state as well through the SHIP program. This, of course, was authorized through the Stowski Affordable Housing Act in 1992, and the funds for this Housing Act is from doc stamps on deeds. This program is administered by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, and essentially sets up partnerships to produce and preserve affordable ownership as well as multifamily housing. It is geared towards very low, and moderate income families. The next steps in this program, of course, is to adopt Ordinance 2020-20 to establish the program and to create the Local Housing Trust Fund. We also will need to establish a 3-year local housing assistance plan, which is a later item under Resolution 2020-134R. We also will need to establish an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which is part of this ordinance, and there's time to establish a committee, and then they are required to provide within a year a report on local housing incentive strategies. We will be submitting this to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation as soon as this is adopted and signed, and then we will be able to start receiving funds from the state as soon as it's approved by the FHFC. It's consistent with our goals for economic development and growth management, and staff recommends approval Ordinance 2020-20, and City Council will request the City Council approve this ordinance.
Do you have anything else?
That's it. That's it on this item.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there anyone in the chamber or online to speak to item number 1?
Item number 1, I don't have anyone in the chamber or the audience to speak on that.
Thank you. Then we'll have discussion and motion by council. What is your pleasure? Mr. Councilmember Askew?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Askew and a second from Councilmember Trace for the approval of ordinance number 2020-20. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Askew,
Great job by staff. Yes.
Councilmember Trace,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Madam Clerk, will you read items number 2 and 3 into the record?
Mayor Blackwell, can you just give us a few minutes for a technical difficulty we're trying to solve in chambers?
That'll be fine. Just let me know when you're ready.
Mayor Blackwell,
Yes.
we just wanted to update the council. We are experiencing some overhead issues that Jay is working on. And we have an audience for the next item.
Okay.
So just give us a few more seconds or
We'll do
minutes.
that. Just
Thank
let
you.
me know when you're ready.
Council, just to give you an update, we have others that are calling in to speak on this item, so give us a few minutes. We're getting them set up.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear Kathy? Jay? Jay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kathy. Are we ready then? Okay, Mayor, we can continue at this time.
All right, we will proceed. Madam Clerk, will you please read items 2 and 3 into the record, please?
First reading and transmittal for ordinance number 2020-01. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning future land use designation of private institutional to approximately 4.84 acres identified as Bedford Falls LLC, located on Old Canoe Creek Road, south of Mesa Verde Drive, north of Mutter Road, providing amending of the official future land use map of the comprehensive plan, filing of the Planning Commission's recommendations, and proof of publication of applicability and effect, severability copies on file and effective date. First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2020-02. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a zoning district of professional compatible with the private institutional future land use designation adopted by ordinance number 2020-01 for approximately 4.84 acres identified as Bedford Falls LLC, located on Old Canoe Creek Road, south of Mesa Verde Drive, north of Mutter Road, providing for entering the designation of the official zoning map, filing the Planning Commission's recommendations, and proof of publication, severability, conflicts, and effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is the first public hearing for a project called Bedford Falls, which is ordinance number 2020-01. It's for approximately 4.84 acres. Approximately 4.84 acres. It's within, it's south of Mesa Verde Drive and north of Mutter along Old Canoe Creek Road. The existing future land use is low density residential, and the proposed use is private institutional, which is comparable to an office use. It's compatible with the general surrounding area, and there are no adverse impacts to city facilities at this time. The DRC and staff recommends approval of ordinance 2020-01, and the Planning Commission at their meeting on June 16, based on their 16 findings, recommended denial. There was a motion to approve, which failed 2-3. The staff is requesting City Council make a finding of consistency for approval of this item. Moving on, the companion item to this is the zoning map amendment. It is ordinance 2020-02, again for the same parcel, same location. The requested zoning, existing zoning is residential estates. The proposed zoning would be professional, which again is compatible and consistent with office use. Currently, there are no adverse impacts to city facilities, and it is consistent with the future land use designation. The strategic plan goal that it's consistent with is for growth management. DRC and staff recommends approval of ordinance 2020-02, and the Planning Commission at their meeting on the 16th, based on their 16 findings, recommended denial with a motion to deny with a vote of 4-1. We ask the City Council approve this item. And that's it. That's all I have. I'm unsure whether the applicant is online. I think they might be online.
Is there a spokesman here to speak for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Joe Thacker,
Thank
17 South Orlando Avenue, Kissimmee, Florida, 4741. Good evening, council members. As staff presented, the request tonight before you is to change the land use from residential to private institutional and the zoning from RE to professional. The applicant has taken into consideration the residential neighborhoods that are existing and has been very thoughtful in the approach to this application. The properties to the north and east are zoned for single-family homes. The property to the west is part of a mixed-use PUD with medium-density residential and commercial along Old Canoe Creek and Lexington. The property to the south is zoned medium-density already. Upon review of all that information and several discussions with staff, who's been very helpful and very protective of the residential neighborhoods, my client determined that the least impactful request is the one before you tonight. This area is transitioning, and this piece of property is an infill piece of property. As you will note on your maps, the property on the north corner of Mutter is zoned commercial, and the properties that will be surrounding the new Turnpike interchange will continue to move away from single-family residential. This is the only remaining large tract with a future land use of low density that is not developed already. All of the low density residential land use in this area is surrounded by commercial and medium density land use. As you can see on the figure 2, so what you have up right now is the zoning map amendment. And as you will note, this is the only property that has an RE single family dwelling on the whole map. Everything else has a more intense zoning. You're going to hear 3 major points by the neighbors: traffic, which the engineer, Jeremy Kibler, will address, property values, and compatibility. On the property values, there are studies that show that new office development does not impact existing residential properties. I would refer you to a study entitled The Impact of Commercial Property Development on Surrounding Residential Property Values. It was prepared by Dr. Wiley at Georgia State University in April of 2015. And basically what it says is housing values appear largely unchanged by new office deliveries over time. The study went on to say that perhaps most surprising is the lack of evidence for negative and significant impacts of commercial development on housing values. Scores of political arguments to the contrary are voiced at local debates across the nation, yet this research does not find substantive evidence of a negative interaction. The study concluded that there's no significant difference in prices before or after development is completed. And what I would point out to the council members is that if you go and look in Pine Lock Estates, the residence that's closest to the car wash property increased in value by $7,900 between 2018 and 2019, despite the commercial development. The property value did not decrease. In fact, it increased. And that is property within this neighborhood. On compatibility, this plan actually has less impact and more compatibility than maybe single family homes may have on the adjoining property. The applicant has provided a conceptual site plan, which shows an increased buffer. A tree survey was provided that shows large trees that can be saved. The applicant has also indicated in submitted documents that it would place a fence along the buffers if the neighbors wanted that. The buildings would be limited to a single story, and the architecture would be residential in character. A proposed architectural standard was provided to staff to demonstrate this commitment. So instead of having backyards to backyards, there would be a nice buffer between the properties. Going back to the comp plan amendment, please note this is a request not for commercial or medium density, but for private institutional. The only zoning categories that are allowed under this designation are neighborhood business district and professional. And I think that fact should ease many concerns. The zoning request is professional. If I may read the first sentence of the description of the district, it states the intent of the professional district is to promote orderly and logical development of land for offices and service activities, to discourage integration of non-complementary land uses that may interfere with the proper function of the district, and to assure adequate design in order to maintain the integrity of existing or future nearby residential areas. So this zoning district is intended to be right next to residential areas. The zoning district has limited permitted uses, mostly centered around the medical profession, offices, and public uses. The one permitted use that the applicant felt may be troublesome is a restaurant use. And to avoid this concern, the applicant has agreed to place a restriction against the property, and a form of the restriction was provided with the application. It's a 30-year prohibition on a restaurant on that property. Further, we arranged a community meeting that was held on March 4th, 2020 at the St. Cloud High School in the cafeteria. We wanted to go through the application with the residents to get input and to answer questions, but the neighbors did not take advantage of this offer. So on a concept plan that was provided with the application, it does show a maximum of 8 single-story, 5,000 square foot offices. It shows the increased buffer, and it shows how the gas easement goes through the property. This all had to be taken into consideration when looking at the benefit of this of the use. So staff has reviewed the application, and the responses that were required pursuant to your Land Development Code 3.4.3.C2A, they recommended approval based on the 16 items. I'm happy to go through all of those with you. A majority of the Planning Commission members failed to recognize the positive impact of this proposed development. The only issue that was clearly stated was an issue as to traffic on Old Canoe Creek and U-turns. And Mr. Kibler is here to discuss those issues, as well as drainage and other technical issues that you may have some questions about. So I'd ask you to look at this property, to consider the impact on the neighborhood, but to see what the applicant has done to try to minimize or limit or even take away that impact. And I would ask that after Mr. Kibler speaks and after the public speaks, that I have the opportunity to address any other concerns that the public may raise. And I thank you for this opportunity. And I would ask if Mr. Kibler could please speak now.
Mr. Kibler, are you available, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Fantastic. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Jeremy Kibler, KDA Engineering, 2017 13th Street, St. Cloud, Florida, 34769. I would first like to address several aspects related to the project, the first being drainage. There are currently no known adverse drainage conditions pertaining directly or related to the subject project. The project will create common stormwater management facilities within the boundaries and limits of the project. Those are perceived at this time to consist of a dry detention system that will meet or exceed treatment and attenuation requirements, and then ultimately discharge to the closed drainage system existing for Old Canoe Creek Road. The subject project is located in the Lake Topekaliga drainage basin. And all of these stormwater facilities will ultimately need to be reviewed and permitted by both the City of St. Cloud as well as the South Florida Water Management District. Next, I'd like to address lighting. With any project, especially commercial projects like this nature, you have several lighting aspects. You have your site lighting, which is related to your parking and pedestrian bikeway areas accessing the subject property, as well as your structural lighting, which you would find on the outside of the building or the individual structures themselves. The LDC, the City of St. Cloud LDC, provides that all of these lighting fixtures meet or exceed IES standards, as well as those strict criteria established in Division 28 exterior lighting standards of the City of St. Cloud Land Development Code. I would like to add that those also include that these fixtures include hoods, visors, or similar shielding devices, ensuring light levels at the property line are no more than 0.5 foot candles. Lastly, I would like to add that upon completion of the project, it is required, and it is part of the Land Development Code, that a certification be made that all of these LDC, these Land Development Code requirements, have been met with the project. If this certification is not made and the city cannot verify this, the certificate of occupancy, the CO for the actual building or buildings, can be withheld at that point. So there is a safety factor involved there. Lastly, I'd like to address transportation. The subject project is perceived at this time to have a single access point, allowing both ingress and egress on Old Canoe Creek Road. I think it's important to note that Old Canoe Creek Road at this point in time is owned and maintained by Osceola County. Any improvements or proposed improvements within this particular right-of-way will ultimately have to be also reviewed and approved by Osceola County. Based on the current condition, the current infrastructure in place for Old Canoe Creek Road, it is believed that with the project, we can construct a left turn lane, a dedicated left turn lane into the project within the existing median. There exists sufficient distance and space to safely do so. This would allow left turn movements southbound on Old Canoe Creek Road into the project, and the ingress and egress point on Old Canoe Creek Road would allow northbound exit from the project and onto Old Canoe Creek Road. The only point which we believe that the county would not permit is a full access, a full median cut on Old Canoe Creek Road, which would require U-turn movements for any vehicles exiting the project and wanting to head southbound on Old Canoe Creek Road. I would add that U-turn, in a sense, has a kind of a bad connotation associated with it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times it is a required turning movement, especially in this case where by design, Old Canoe Creek Road is designed as a limited access facility and controlled in that way. What we would propose is that we believe any vehicles exiting the proposed project that did want to head southbound on Old Canoe Creek Road could head northbound on Old Canoe Creek Road and then utilize the existing left turn lane at the signalized intersection of Lexington Boulevard with Old Canoe Creek Road. We've currently, U-turn movements are allowed at this intersection. And we also feel that if needed, upon a traffic analysis, the timing of the signal could also be adjusted to account for additional vehicles that may want to perform this U-turn movement at that location. I would also like to note for council that there are, being a limited traffic facility, a limited access facility, Old Canoe Creek Road, there are already several access points and several roadways that are currently performing U-turn movements. And these are vehicles exiting on Pine Lake Drive, Mesa Verde Drive, and not just Trace Drive. So those are already taking place now. As Ms. Thacker stated, we would like to reserve the opportunity to address any concerns or comments or questions that either council or the audience may have, and happy to answer anything else, any other technical aspects that may come up. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll stand by. Madam Clerk, who do we have wanting to speak to this item from the public?
Okay, I have 7 residents that have signed up and 1 on Zoom. So we'll start with the first one I have is Bob Stein. You'll come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
I've got overheads and things, so who do I give these to?
They can see whatever you have in front of them. You'll notice the camera with the audience, second one in the top.
In front of me, to the camera. Yeah.
It's going to become part of the record. You'll have to leave that here.
Yes, that's the point. Yeah, we intended on that. This last minute change of location has this a little discombobulated here.
Thank you.
Can you move it closer? Yes.
Okay, I actually got you. You can maybe hold that down for just a minute. I'm going to have you do the other one here first.
Okay.
Let's see here.
I'm sorry, if you go ahead and state your name for the record, they have some photos they're wanting to
My
submit
name
for.
is Bob Stein. I live at 4707 Mesa Verde Drive, St. Cloud, Florida, 34769. And I apologize, but the last minute change in location has us a little rattled here. I need to address a couple of things first that they had started saying. There was a meeting with the neighbors. There wasn't a meeting with any neighbors. I haven't found any neighbors that was aware of any meeting. We were told they were going to do that, but no one in the neighborhood has met with them yet. The notion that there's no drainage problem, I do want to point out that we've repeatedly come back to let you know that there is a flooding problem on Lake Trudy and Mesa Verde from water runoff coming off of this property, and are concerned about parking lot and building would just enhance that. I wanted to point out that the median on Old Canoe Creek, that's under jurisdiction of Osceola County, and would need their approval before anything could be done. And perhaps that would be the first place to go. The second thing would be the gas line that runs through the property. The requirement from the easement agreement requires that they have written approval before doing anything. I don't believe that FGT has been contacted for that whatsoever at all. So I'd like to also reserve the opportunity to come back and redress as everyone else has. So I have 3 visuals to share with you tonight. First is a petition in opposition of this request. We've collected signatures from 155 homes who oppose this rezoning. We couldn't get to every home we wanted, but the yellow highlighted homes on this petition map are homeowners who signed the petition. There are only 3 homes who refused to sign, and that's because they didn't want to get involved. The second visual is the photo map of Old Canoe Creek Road. Now, the applicant keeps making reference to the Old Canoe Creek commercial corridor as if it was something that actually existed. And I know you've got different colors on your zoning maps and whatnot, but I actually walked the properties and I took photographs. And
keep talking.
And I wanted to show you the reality of this commercial corridor in that it's exclusively residential. Looking at the highlighted petition, you'll also see, and this photo map, you'll also see that all of these homes and the surrounding properties are low density, single family homes and have signed the petition in opposition to this rezoning, including the homes on Old Canoe Creek Road. These people live here. These are their homes. They have no intentions of tearing them down to allow for a commercial corridor. My third and final visual is a collage of some of the many for sale and for lease signs I walked around and took pictures of. I would argue that based upon all the office space currently available within a mile of the property and the 50,000 square foot complex St. Cloud Regional will open this summer, the city of St. Cloud does not need any additional medical offices. We can't fill the ones that already exist. And despite what the applicant says, Pine Lake Estates is not an underserved area. Clearly, based on the petition now, the residents do not want a medical complex in their neighborhood. Since there are no building plans, only an artist's rendition of what might be built there, we really don't know what we might end up with. Personally, I believe that the applicant's intention is to increase the value of the property by rezoning it and then flipping it. But if they did build a medical complex, it would create a public safety hazard. You can see on the photo map, you could, the solid median exists in front of this property. It would require making U-turns to enter or exit the property. Physicians schedule appointments in 10-minute blocks or 6 patients per hour. The artist's rendition of 8 office buildings will result in 6 times 8 or 48 vehicles making at least 1 U-turn on Old Canoe Creek Road every hour. This number of vehicles is an absolute minimum, assuming only 1 physician per building. A large number of vehicles attempting to make a U-turn on Old Canoe Creek Road will excessively increase traffic congestion and create a public safety hazard. I ask you, protect our homes, protect our lifestyles, and protect our neighborhood by denying this application once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, who do we have next?
I have Karen Stein. You'll approach the podium and state your name and address for the record.
I can't see the clock either.
Okay, we'll see if we can get the camera adjusted.
So please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes, please.
My name is Karen Stein. It is at 4707 Mesa Verde Drive, St. Cloud, Florida 34769. Twice before you, our city council, have denied a request to own this property. On June the 16th, the Planning Commission Board voted to deny recommendation to the request to change future land use and zoning of this property, which is currently zoned for single-family homes. The board member that made the motion to deny stated it was for many of the reasons presented. When pressed for only one for the record, he stated the loss of the homeowner's property value. It is just dishonest to say that 8 buildings, a parking lot with 134 parking spaces, security lighting, and dumpsters will not have a negative impact on the value of my home, as well as the other 12 homes that border this property. Additionally, when our home values decrease, there will be a negative impact on homes throughout our neighborhood. Agreeing to rezone this property, resulting in a loss of value to homeowners versus an increased value to the property in question, could indeed be considered a grant of special privilege, especially when you consider the numerous medical spaces available, as well as 50,000 square foot medical complex currently under construction. Many of the homes bordering this property have pools. They are enjoyed by their owners, their children, and their grandchildren. None of these homes have privacy fences. Surely you can understand and appreciate the privacy and security concerns of the boarding residents when the only required border between their backyards and a 134 parking lot is a hedge. The land is currently zoned for single-family homes. This is 100% consistent with surrounding structures on all sides. Rezoning this property would create an isolated district. On November 15, 2018, the applicant requested the exact same change to future land use and zoning, and City Council denied the application because there was no site building plan. We are in exactly the same position today. The applicant provided an artist's rendition. This is not a site plan or a commitment as to what will be built there, nor should it be construed as such. The offer of a limited deed reasonably indicates an intent to have this property rezoned and then to sell it. If it is rezoned, the current owner or any future owner would be free to construct anything permitted, such as a drugstore, massage therapist, cemetery, and the list goes on. The homeowners affected would have no recourse. I, along with the 155 residents who signed the petition, ask you for the third time to deny this request. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Madam Clerk, who do we have next?
Next, we have Terry Park.
Please state your name and address for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Terry Park, 34769. Once again, we have the same petition before us that we have tried to eliminate previously. The car wash, as stated by Ms. Thacker, is not near our neighborhood. There are several multifamily homes in between that property and Pine Lake Estates. We are to the left of this property. There's residential properties to the right. Anthem Park, the development across from Pine Lake Estates, necessitated a U-turn for people who live on Mesa Verde to have to make in order to get onto their street. This U-turn would be directly across from this property where we're going to be expected to dodge the cars that are going to be pulling in and out of there to get into our neighborhood, make that turn. The commercial night security lights that will be shining through people's bedroom windows in our neighborhood would definitely be much brighter than any light a residential home would have. This is not compatible with the surrounding area. As I said before, it's residential homes across the street in Anthem Park and on either side of this property. We knew nothing about the March 4th meeting this Ms. Thacker mentioned that no one came to. I think it's because we weren't notified. Once again, we ask that you please deny this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk.
Next, we have Don Grisby.
Good evening, Dawn Grigsby, 622 Cypress Court. I was going to read a letter from the president of the Pine Lake Estates Homeowners League Board, but it would just be reiterating all of the great statements that you've already heard here tonight. So in the spirit of time, which I'm a little curious as to how come the petitioners seem like they got a lot more time than we did, but maybe it's because there's so many of us. And I hope that council would understand how passionate we are about this. I have a couple quick questions to ask, and maybe they can address it later. But Mr. Keebler, we're curious, where is it that the owners of this property live? And Ms. Thacker, we really would like to know the addresses and how the people that were supposedly made aware of a meeting on March 4th, to whom those letters went to. As a member of the Pine Lake Estate Homeowners Board, we have no idea about this. And we would definitely get there. As you can see, we're passionate about it. Also would really like to understand how it is that they continue to keep proposing changes to property and there's not really a lot of, let's just be honest, truthful information being given. All of those statements, the 16 items that have to pass the Planning Commission, none of those really, other than putting the word no in front of them, showed us that this would not impact the residents over there. These people have lived there for 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years. So changing around us and just telling us to get used to it is just not good community. We'd really love to know what studies, if you'd like to share that with us, Ms. Thacker, studies that were done in Georgia might not necessarily apply to St. Cloud, Florida. So we would really appreciate greatly if the council would deny this request to change this zoning and plan use. And I just leave you with one question. If it was happening right next door to your home, how would you also feel? Thank you very much for your consideration and your time.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Next, we have Melissa Kennedy.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Melissa Kennedy and I live at 1707 Pinon Circle in Pine Lake Estates. I wanted to say that this is the third time this has been brought forward and I'm opposed again to the rezoning request of the property on Old Canoe Creek Road owned by Bedford Falls. There are many reasons for this opposition, and as a homeowner in Pine Lake Estates, I could go on and on. The number one reason this should not move forward is that the Planning Commission does not recommend this rezoning request. It was moved forward without recommendation. This is big. The 16 requirements were not met, therefore this should all be a moot point. Other reasons, which will of course be heard again this evening, have to do with flooding issues, noise and light pollution, decreases in home values to those who border the property, the constant construction pounding, and the trucks going in and off the property until something is eventually built, the natural gas line running through the property, and of course the traffic through Pine Lake Estates. This is the area in which I will focus. For many years, people have treated our neighborhood with little regard. It is always being used as a cut through to get to a destination more quickly. Anyone who lives here can tell you the same thing. If the property in question gets rezoned, it will absolutely, without question, increase traffic, not only on Old Canoe Creek Road, but in turn on Mesa Verde and on Pine Lake Drive. To say otherwise is foolish, as there are currently zero need right now for any vehicle to pull in or out of this property as it stands. Should there be a business built, people coming from the north will be forced to make a U-turn in the median of Old Canoe Creek Road, as there would not be a direct turn lane into the property. When exiting the property, they would turn right out of the parking lot to travel north on Old Canoe Creek. If they wish to get to the other side of town more quickly or to the hospital area, they will absolutely be turning right onto Mesa Verde, then to Peachtree, or they will take Pine Lake Drive directly through and cut through to 17th Street. The increase in traffic alone is dangerous. Pine Lake Estates does not have sidewalks. It was built in the late 70s and early 80s when there wasn't anything around and nobody had a reason to drive through. When my family moved in, there was a huge farm on Old Canoe Creek Road where Anthem Park is today. As COVID-19 has shown us, we have many people outside walking, jogging, riding bikes, walking pets, and the only place to do this is the street. I have a son who walks to and from his bus stop each day, obviously not right now, and rides his bike down to his friend's house and to his grandmother's house, all in Pine Lake Estates. I don't want him to be hit by someone speeding through the neighborhood. Did I mention that most of the traffic coming through does not adhere to the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit? Did I mention that at least 90% of the vehicles disregard the stop signs? They are simply cutting through. Can we please think about this and what it is going to mean for us in a year or two, or even later on down the road? Just because a beautiful drawing has been made, it doesn't make it so. Could be a medical office with pretty pictures, Sounds nice. Once rezoned, anything can be put on that land that is zoned professional, including a 35-foot tall building. And the intent is to make a profit. Low-density residential or professional, which is worth more money to a developer trying to sell a property bought fairly cheap? I am going to request that you please deny this request, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
I have Jan Bartko.
Good evening. My name is Janice Bartko, and I live at 4701 Mesa Verde Drive, which is located in Pine Lake Estates. I wanted to say that I am against any rezoning of the property on Old Canoe Creek Road owned by Bedford Falls. I live at the corner of Mesa Verde and Lake Trudy. When it rains, the Lake Trudy side of my yard floods. It floods into the street as well. I believe it has gotten worse since some of the trees were cleared on that property over the last year or so. To add buildings and take out more of the green space will only add to the flooding problems. I also believe that the traffic on Mesa Verde will increase. In fact, Pine Lakes Estates is used as a cut-through now. Mesa Verde and Pine Lakes Drive are both riddled with speeding cars, and rarely anyone stops at the stop sign. It will only get worse with more traffic cutting through. We have kids that play in the yard on the corner of Mesa Verde and Lake Trudy. It's very dangerous as it is. We don't have sidewalks, so adults and children must ride their bikes, walk their pets, or jog on the streets. I ask you to deny the request for rezoning on the Bedford Falls property. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
I have Chris Boger.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
I live at 4700 Mesa Verde Drive, and overall, everybody's telling you the same thing. They did this for several meetings by now. Just kind of wondering, you know, do we have to keep going through this over and over, and then one night somebody don't show up, and then you're going to pass it, or, you know, I just don't understand that. As far as traffic goes, if you talk about putting it where they could turn left out of there, every subdivision up and down that road would like to have that access. Somebody new comes in, they want that. But the ones that lived here 40 years, 30, 40 years, hey, you don't need it. So overall, the developer, he knew when he bought that land, it was residential. I'm sorry, but he should keep it residential and fulfill the rest of the neighborhood. Fit in, don't try to change everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
At this time, I have Cody Krug he's called in on the Zoom call.
Cody, would you like to speak? Please state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Is Cody there?
I really understand you speaking about
Did Cody send in on it? I think he did.
Is there a problem?
It looks like he's not being heard. Cody, you're unmuted. Can you hear us? Can you speak? Looks like you muted again.
Mayor, can we leave the channel open for him just in case he gets back in?
I didn't understand.
So can we leave the channel open for him just in case he gets back in?
Yes, we can do that. If we can't work this out, I'll give him 10 more seconds. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else to speak in the chamber or online?
I have gone through all the slips that had registered at this time.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. I think I've heard enough, and I'd like to make a motion that we deny this request of the change of land use.
I promised the applicant that I would let her speak again, and I would
like to. That's fine.
Ms. Thacker, would you like to speak again?
I need to be unmuted. Thank you. I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'd like to address is a couple of issues that were raised. On the community meeting, I got the list from the city. I sent out the letters to all of the property owners. I put down that there was going to be a community meeting. I put the time, the date, gave all of my contact information in the letter, and I was present at the cafeteria at the high school. The planner from the city of St. Cloud was also there. So that's how the community meeting happened. It was a voluntary meeting at the expense of the developer, and I'm the one that sent the letters out, so I know they went out. On the drainage problem that was raised, Mr. Kibler explained how the drainage, all drainage would be, the historical drainage would still be accepted, and all other drainage would be treated on site. On the photographs that were presented, they did show the existing residential as well as some multifamily that's in that neighborhood. But what it failed to show is that the zoning is in place to allow for much higher intensity. This application is different than the previous application in that there is a plan that's been presented. There are architectural standards that have been presented. There is an increased buffer that's been presented. All of these issues that have been brought up previously, we tried to address. That was the whole intent behind this application. The transportation issues are the same as Mr. Kibler presented, and if there are questions on the transportation, I know that he would be happy to address those. On the buffering, I did offer a fence if the neighbors want that. So there would be that buffer as well as the landscape buffer and the tree buffer. In the zoning district, the dumpsters have to be screened and no lighting is allowed to go off the property. So those issues are not really issues. Noise is also addressed in this zoning district. So it's not the same application. It's an applicant that has listened to what the neighbors are concerned about, has tried to address that, and as staff has recommended approval based on the information and based on what's in your land development code. So I would ask that the council please consider this thoughtful application and recommend that it be approved. Thank you.
Mr. Menezares, would you please address the issue that this is a quasi-judicial issue, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So essentially, in any zoning or land use matter, as there's two cases before you, there's a land use change and there's a zoning change application. Essentially, what the quasi judicial proceeding means is that your decision is supposed to be based on competent, substantial evidence that's presented to you with regard to the particular application in front of you, and you should focus on the application that is being presented, regardless of any prior applications that may have been submitted with regard to the particular property. It also means that once the staff has made a recommendation or the applicant has presented information to show that and you've heard them talked about, that the 16 factors set forth in the city code, that they have been maintained and met, then the city council, to go against that, needs to, based on competent, substantial evidence, essentially overrule that recommendation by the staff or that petition by the applicant in this case, and determine that based on substantial competent evidence that those 16 factors haven't been met. So your role is to listen to all the information presented to you tonight and to rely upon the evidence that's been presented to you to determine whether first the land use is compatible or consistent with the city's comprehensive plan for the area, and then subsequently whether the zoning request is similarly compatible and consistent with the zoning for the particular area.
Thank you, Mr. Azaris. This time we'll have discussion and a motion by council.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion.
Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think we still need to deny this. I have some problems with it. There's a lot of walking dogs and things like that, and you're going to have to make U-turns to come back to that. I think we're following the same thing. We're going back to the same place that we've already done, and it looks like we turned it down once, and we're going to have to do it again. How many more times are we going to do this? That's where I stand. I think we just deny the request and don't change the land use. That's my motion.
We have a motion for denial. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second for denial. Madam Clerk.
And Mayor, before you call the roll, I'll make sure we're talking about ordinance number 2020-01.
Okay, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, so we have a motion for denial of ordinance number 2020-01. Before I do, does the council have any other discussion you want to make?
Mayor.
Mr. Askew.
I guess the way I'm looking at this, at least this time, it was at least got a chance to see what a picture looked like. But again, I think Deputy Mayor Matheny's brought it up more than once that we can approve a picture, but doesn't mean the picture's can actually be built. So, and for the record, I had a chance to talk to Ms. Thacker and the owner as well. But again, unless somebody's going to come forward and say, yeah, we're going to build that picture and we're not going to build something else, it's really hard to approve things. So, and, it's hard to put teeth to things. The pictures look great, but, I really don't even want to, if I start thinking about a residential in that area being 3 stories and impeding into their backyards. But again, it's in our case, sometimes it gets very hard to approve things, and you approve the picture, but that's not what gets built. So unless I can get total confidence that's exactly what's going to be built in that spot, it's really hard to put my teeth in that.
Councilmember Matheny, are you wanting to say something?
Yes, please. I wanted to say for the record that I also spoke with Ms. Thacker. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied today. So I know this is a challenging one, and I understand both sides of this. And I when I saw it back on the agenda, I said to council on my agenda review, I said, okay, let's go through all the comments that we had on all these different applications. And I was told by staff, well, it's a different application. And I said, well, no, I remember the other ones. So let's go through all the comments. I knew buffering was a concern, lighting, noise, things like that. And so I was happy to see that they've, tried to address that. I would like to see a fence personally. Like, I love the trees and things, but I'd like to see a fence as well. And I think Ms. Thacker said that that was an option. One of the questions that I asked Ms. Thacker is back to what Councilmember Askew just said, was when I had my agenda review, I was told that building plans were submitted, like of what they plan the buildings look like, which are not included in our package. So I asked for them to be emailed to us separately, which I did receive. I'm assuming all the other council members did. I did speak to Ms. Thacker about that today, and I said, would you be willing to put that as part of the approval, that this is exactly, this is what's going to be built. It's going to look like this. And she had indicated yes, which I guess we can give her time to come back to that. I'm just kind of reading my notes here. So the fence, to include the graphics in the approval. Is the 1 story, is that in the approval as well? Because I agree with Councilmember Askew, I don't want a 3 or 5 story building being built right in the backyards, peeking into the backyards of people's houses. I totally get that. Is that also in the in the package? Because I didn't notice that.
Would you like to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you may speak.
Thank you. Yes, in the package, it does say that it would be limited to a 1-story building. It also says that we would provide a fence. It also says that it would be maximum of 8 5,000-foot office buildings. So that is in the request and is actually stated in the request. Furthermore, I did submit standards on the record. We will say that we will build the office professional buildings, and they will look like the architecture that's been submitted. So I can put on the record that is what you are going to get. I also did the D restriction to show we're serious. No restaurants. If there are other uses that you want to specifically restrict, we can do that. So I am stating, and it was very clear in our application and in our response to the 16 items, that it would be 5,000-foot office buildings, residential in nature, 1-story buildings with an increased buffer, a fence. So all of those things, while usually you can't get a commitment that that's what's going to be built in pretty pictures, but we put in our application that that's what we'll build, how we'll build it. And so that's why it's a little bit different than the previous applications, because you have specifics that you did not have before.
Ms. Matheny, you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Well, I'm struggling with this. I certainly spoke to Ms. Thacker also. And, the thing that I'm really struggling with is it's been approved by the staff, and I don't know of any legal reason, if it's a quasi-judicial issue that's before us, I don't know of a legal reason why, if they've met all of the conditions that staff says they've met, and then they're also saying they're going to build what they showed us, the elevation, why it should be denied. I certainly understand all the emotional reasons that are stated by, the residents in the community. But I'm really struggling with being one to vote against denying it at this point for those reasons.
Everybody else seems to be speaking.
Are we ready to vote? Are there any other discussion by council at this point? Any other questions that you want to ask?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Trace. Councilmember Trace.
I guess I didn't give my reasons for the second, but I did have a conversation with Ms. Thacker today, and then after the last denial, I did end up meeting with the owner of the property. And what I told him at that meeting is, if anything's to be built now, and if he wants to build anything now on the property, it's residential. Until those properties to the south redevelop in a mixed-use fashion, that 20 acres there between Mutter and this property, to me, it doesn't mesh with the surrounding area. If Mutter Road connects through all the way to the hospital, that brings that medical corridor out onto Old Canoe Creek. Right now, this would be just a little enclave of commercial at this point, kind of a midpoint on Old Canoe Creek. If this does end up moving forward, I do have some other recommendations of changes to the site plan and changes to uses if we go through, but that would be on the zoning side of things.
Thank you. Would anyone else on the council like to speak?
Sure, I would like to hear that. Keith, if you can elaborate, that would be fantastic.
Well, kind of the first question for staff is if we're adding all these requirements on here, why wasn't this a PD development to where we can, the whole point of a PD development is to negotiate some of these development standards in intricate situations instead of just going straight zoning?
Okay.
Mayor, before Mr. Anderson tries to address that question, I would remind the council that you do have a provision in your code that allows for basically a voluntary restrictions placed on the zoning. So sometimes the PD isn't used as the process because there is the ability to do that if the applicant requests or suggests it. And then what you've heard tonight is that the applicant is open to placing further restrictions on the zoning piece of this, which is the next item. And under your code, you could just include those on the restriction of zoning. And then obviously they run with the land forever until it's rezoned, if at all.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Trace, the reason why this was not negotiated as a PD was, one, because staff was satisfied with the application as presented as a straight zoning, and two, that's the application that we received and commented on, and staff reviewed it based on the 16 findings and found it to be sufficient. So therefore, there was not a discussion or need to convert it to a PUD and negotiate any additional requirements. As Ms. Thacker indicated, she submitted a covenant restriction that lists the specific restrictions that she was willing to proffer. And as such, again, she voluntarily restricted development. It was never submitted as a PUD, so we would never have begun that discussion to negotiate something else other than what they had originally submitted.
Thank you. Mr. Trace, do you have anything else?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other discussion by council? Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. I would also like to hear Mr. Trace's suggested edits before we have this vote.
Okay. So the left turn lane is a big thing, just to make sure there's no U-turn movements. There should be, regardless if this develops as residential or as professional office, there needs to be connectivity to the south. This 5 acres, in addition to the 15 acres to the south, needs to develop kind of in a cohesive pattern. I don't see any loading zone on this plan. Road connection buffers can always be wider. And then one of the bigger things is, in my mind, professional office and general office can be a 1 for 300 parking requirement, but medical office should be 1 for 200. There's typically a lot more staff in there per office unit, and then also the high turnover of folks in waiting rooms and whatnot, in my mind, requires a higher parking standard. And then if this does go forward as professional, no nursing home or assisted living facility, no cemetery, drugstore, church, or restaurant, as some of the uses that are in our use table for professional that I don't think really jive with the area.
You have any other questions, Ms. Councilmember Matheny?
No, sorry.
Okay. Okay. The motion before us is for the denial of ordinance number 2020-01. Motion made by Councilmember Cooper, second by Councilmember Trace. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor, Mr. Cody Krug has finally contacted and he's requesting to speak.
Okay, I'll allow him to speak then.
He's going to have to speak through the phone on the mic.
That'll be fine.
You can go ahead and speak.
Okay. This is Cody Crew, 4743 Mesa Verde Drive. I just don't want to take up too much time more than we already have. I just want to point out that while you guys were talking, I read the paper that I think Joe Thacker referenced about property values. And on page 31, it breaks apart industrial, office, and retail, and actually says office buildings do have a negative impact. Her own paper says that. On the last page, it talks about the dashed black line represents the counterfactual trend that would have occurred had the development not occurred, which shows the dashed line above predicted line. So I just wanted to add that her own paper refutes what she says. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. I think are we concluded with our discussion, Ms. Stacker? Do you need to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to speak and say that the uses that Mr. Trace listed as not being acceptable, we would be fine to restrict those and also make the connection to the south property for future development purposes.
All right.
Mayor, can you repeat those?
Councilmember Askew?
Can you repeat those, please?
Can you repeat those items again, Mr. Trace?
Nursing home, assisted living, cemetery, drugstore, restaurant, and church.
And Mayor, yeah, I just want to remind the council that I know we're looking at particular details, but this is before you for first reading and introduction. So to the extent it does move forward, we would work on the appropriate documentation to list those, and the council would have another look at it to make sure that all those items were contained in the approvals if it goes that far.
And then Mr. Manzares, I have a question. Because it's a motion for denial, what happens if the motion for denial is not passed?
Well, then we would like to have a motion for approval if to move it forward. Again, it's first reading and introduction. This isn't final action by the council. So if it's denied, typically how introduction and first reading works is that if there's a denial of that basically is the council telling the world we don't have enough interest in moving forward with this item, so we don't want to move forward at all. If this motion as presented is passed, that's what will happen. If the motion is denied, then we'd ask for another motion to approve it to move it to the second final hearing.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Are we done?
Mayor, I would like to say it has.
Call the roll. Does everybody understand what the motion is for denial?
I did have somebody in the audience that still wanted to speak for a second time.
No, we're done. Let's move on. Let's
All
vote.
right, thank you. Okay. Councilmember Trace?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
No.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
No.
You say no, I'm sorry.
No.
Mayor Blackwell?
I vote no.
Motion denies 3-2.
Could I entertain a motion for approval?
Lost that one. Lost that one.
Could I entertain a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion with all of the changes that we talked about I guess all of them were in the actual item except for the two at the end restricting the uses, which I didn't write them down. No nursing home and a couple other things, and connectivity to the south.
Thank
If
you.
somebody wants to read off all the restrictive uses, Mr. Trace,
Yep.
I didn't write them down.
We'll be able to bring those forward at the next hearing, will we not? Thank you, Mr. Mazaris.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion by Councilmember Matheny. Do I have a second?
Excuse me, Mayor, what's the motion?
The motion is for the approval of ordinance number 2020-01 with the additions that we have talked about.
And just for everybody's understanding, those restrictions are more appropriately to be placed on the second item and not on this item. So based on the understanding of the council, if it does move forward, we would work to incorporate those into the zoning ordinance, and that's where you would see those.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Councilmember Matheny.
Can I amend my motion to also include including the renderings of the buildings to be in the approval so that it will be built in substantial conformance with the renderings that we've been provided?
Absolutely. No objections. Do I have a second?
Mayor, first item.
Yes.
Can we look at adding fire station, police station, government offices?
Yes, sir. I'm sure we can. Will ultimately be something we'd ultimately add to the next zoning issue anyway, will we not?
Friendly amendment accepted.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, be recognized.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Could I ask the mayor to ask the clerk to read all those qualifiers into the record so we can make sure it's clear? It's kind of been all over the place, and I think they should be read. We all understand what they are, please.
And Mayor, just for the process perspective, I would respectfully ask if we could wait to the next item to read those off. That would be more along the process side of this.
All right. Thank you. Will that be acceptable? We're back to the original motion. We'll add this stuff on in the second if it passes. Do I have a second for the approval of motion 2020-01? I'll make a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Deputy Matheny?
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper?
Cooper, thank you.
No.
Councilmember Askew?
No.
Councilmember Trace?
Nay.
Mayor Black?
Yes.
Motion
fails. So if the motion fails, we move on to item number 2. No need to even consider it.
Well, if I may.
Yes.
So what you did was that denial was related to the obviously the land use. The zoning is a little bit different. The applicant could provide to you as you move forward an item a different zoning than what was advertised, but one that's less intense, but is consistent with the existing land use on the property, which is low density. So I don't know if the applicant would like to modify this since we are at introduction to address that and move it forward, or whether they'll just want to ride with the current zoning that they have.
Ms. Thacker, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would ask that the zoning be changed to R1B based on the compatibility of the existing land use, which is residential. That zoning then matches the properties along Mesa Verde. And so I would go ahead and request that the council consider that request before you tonight.
Would you explain that to us, what that means?
Well, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I can do it, Ms. Thacker. So essentially what they're asking is to amend their request for the adoption of ordinance first reading of the first public hearing and introduction of ordinance number 2020-02 to revise the application to request a zoning of R1B instead of private institutional. And that is, as I understand it, and Mr. Anderson should probably confirm this, that is consistent with the existing land use on the property of low density residential. So it would, if you are inclined to move forward with this item, they're asking that the ordinance be introduced with a zoning of R1B to be for a final consideration at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Yes, you can, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Manzares is correct that the requested rezoning to R1B is consistent with low density residential. Process-wise, the DRC reviewed a non-residential application. Therefore, we did not get the benefit of the school district of Osceola County's comments as part of the DRC. They provided none. So therefore, we will need to bring this back to DRC for them to weigh in on this residential rezoning.
Mayor?
Yes.
I appreciate that. We're sort of getting what we, I think, really want out of this. I would make a motion. I think we need to let citizens speak, but I would make a motion to approve the residential.
So we're making a motion for the approval of 2020-02 with the designation of R-1B. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Athenia, motion from Councilmember Askew. Does everybody understand what we're voting on?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is going to be only just residential then, right? Correct?
Ms. Sacker?
Yeah, yes,
Yes, sir.
If it gets finally approved, remember, this is not final approval. If it gets finally approved at the July 23rd council meeting, then yes, it would be only residential.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mr. Cooper?
Well, and I think that's what everybody wanted. Is that correct? That got up and spoke tonight?
We would just like some clarification on that.
Madam Clerk, you called the, I'm ready to have the vote. Is that all? Yes, Councilmember Trace.
So I still have a comment about connectivity to the south and have a stub out to the south as this develops further. And then procedurally, would this go back to DRC before it goes to the second hearing?
I think staff would probably set it up to go back for a staff review prior to the next meeting, but obviously since the next meeting is July 23rd, there's ample time to get that done.
Okay.
Okay. And do we give the public, because of this change, do we give the public a chance to speak?
You could, I think you've heard all about the project already, but there will be an opportunity at the final hearing for the public to speak also, again.
The application changed a bunch, so I just wanted to make sure that if there are any other concerns.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, you may. Mr. Anderson.
Just to clarify, there is not sufficient time to get it back to the next city council meeting on July 23rd. We'll have to move it to probably the August 13th meeting. We are short staffed and will not be able to meet that short deadline.
All right, that's understandable. Would anyone like to, I'm going to give, we're going to have comments later. You have a question? I'll hear your question.
Thank you. We're just very confused because as residents we believe that it is residential, so we don't understand. Could somebody help us? Don Grigsby, 622 Cypress Court.
Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Anderson could explain what R1B allows.
Mr. Anderson, please explain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. R1B is a residential zoning district that permits dwelling units, single-family dwelling units, and the minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet, and the minimum lot width is 62.5 feet. So it's your typical single family subdivision of lots that are at a minimum 6 to 2.5 feet wide.
So is it multifamily? You're just single family, correct?
Again, these are single family detached units similar to what is found in the Pine Lake Estates subdivision.
Okay, we were under the impression that's what it was, so excuse our confusion.
All right. Thank you.
Isn't it zoned R1D right now?
It's not zoned R1D currently, is that correct?
It is zoned RE.
I don't know, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure she heard that. It is not zoned R1B currently.
It is currently zoned RE residential estates.
Okay, so the estate, it just is the size, is what we're talking about.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Residential estates requires a larger lot size.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can we call the roll? Are we ready?
Councilmember Cooper,
No.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Councilmember Trace,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Brings us to item number 4, of which I believe the city manager, are you pulling this item?
Yes, Mayor, this item is pulled. Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to items 5 and 6. Madam Clerk, will you please read those 2 items?
Mayor, we have confusion. Do we have to vote on 2020-02? Because that was for 2020-01.
We voted on 2020-2, did we not?
Yes, sir. That was the motion on the zoning item for that project.
Right. Change that to R-1B.
Thank you for clarification for the record.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Ivy, are you ready to read items 5 and 6?
First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2020-13. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, to annex into the City of St. Cloud approximately 9.5 acres identified of Cordova, west of Hickory Tree Road, south of Alligator Lake Road, north of Cypress Drive, in accordance with the voluntary annexation provisions of Chapter 171.044 Florida statutes. First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2020-14, an ordinance of the City of St. Cloud, City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a zoning district of R1B, single-family dwelling, compatible with low-density residential, future land use designation for approximately 9.5 acres, located west of Hickory Tree Road, south of Alligator Lake Road, north of Cypress Drive, providing for entering the designation of the official zoning map, filing of the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, severability, conflicts, and effective date.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Mr. Anderson, speak.
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is a voluntary annexation request for a project known as Cordova. It is south of Alligator Lake Road on the west side of Hickory Tree Road across from the Hanover Lakes subdivision. And it is approximately 9.5 acres. And it's a request to be annexed into the city limits of St. Cloud. And along with this annexation is also an automatic zone, future land use change to low density residential. The application meets the criteria of section 171.044 Florida statute regarding contiguous and reasonably compact application. And we received a signed petition from the property owners of this application. It abuts city limits on the eastern boundary, and the existing future land use is low density residential within the county. Therefore, we would assign an automatic zoning land use change of low density residential as well. The existing zoning is AC, agriculture, conservation. It's compatible with the surrounding area, and there's no adverse impacts to city facilities at this time. The strategic plan goal that it's consistent with is growth management, and Dear Steering staff recommends approval of Ordinance 2020-13. The Planning Commission at their meeting on June 16th also recommended approval of Ordinance 2020-13 based on the 16 findings within our land development code, as the City Council do the same. The companion item is the zoning map amendment for Cordova, the similar property, same acreage. It's for a zoning map amendment to be consistent with the future land use of low density residential. The requested rezoning is R1B, which requires a minimum lot width of 62.5 feet and a minimum area of 7,500 square feet. It is compatible with the surrounding area and there are no adverse impacts to city facilities at this time. It's consistent with the growth management strategic plan goal. DRC and staff at their meeting back in April recommend approval of Ordinance 2020-14. The Planning Commission at their meeting also recommended approval of Ordinance 2020-14 based on the 16 findings in the Land Development Code and asked that the City Council do the same. Again, this is the first reading.
Thank you. Is there anyone with Cordova here to speak to this?
I have no one that has registered and no one in the audience.
Right? No one in the public? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, Max?
Yes.
Would you like to speak?
Yes, I would just like to concur with the findings of the staff and also the unanimous recommendation of the planning department. And I'm hoping that this would be the easier R1B application that is before you. And I'm hoping that we would get your approval.
Could you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Max Subedi, New Earth Properties, 128 East Colonial Drive, Orlando, 32801.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Madam Clerk, you did say there was no one to speak to this?
Right, I have no one in the audience or registered for that.
Thank you. Then I will have discussion, a motion regarding ordinance number 2020-13.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. How many total homes will be on that property?
Councilmember, we haven't obviously done our engineering, but we estimate that it would be somewhere between 21 to 27, depending, how the engineers could resolve the issues having to do with drainage and all the code requirements.
Okay, and this is all 62.5-foot lots, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions, Councilman Cooper?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion by council?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from Councilmember Trace for the approval of ordinance number 2020-13. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Cooper. Madam Clerk, you call the roll.
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Councilmember Trace.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Hi, I had my, I was unmuted to say something, so I'm going to say it before I vote. But this all goes back to, I brought this up for years now, that, we need to have a global conversation about what the actual limits of the city are and where we want the city to end, just because, it was drawn on a map 25 years ago. Is that exactly how big we want the city to be? So we keep getting these annexations. This one's across from something we've already annexed, but that is some conversation I think we need to have very quickly. Like, what's the limit of the city, and what's the limit of our water service area? So, just bringing that up again. So, I'm a yes for this one.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't see you requesting to speak.
Councilmember Cooper.
Aye, and I have the same question. I guess I had brought it up before that we need to find out the boundaries of where we're going to be and how far do you want to go? Yes.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any discussion or motion regarding ordinance number 2020-14? I'm looking.
Motion to approve ordinance 2020-14.
We have a motion from Councilmember Trace. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second, was that Askew?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Trace,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny,
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
That brings us to items 7, 8, and 9. Madam Clerk.
First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2020-16. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida to annex into the City of St. Cloud approximately 10.22 acres identified of Poffenbaugh, located east of Live Oak Boulevard and south of East Erlo Bronson Memorial Highway in accordance with voluntary annexation provisions of Chapter 171.044 Florida statutes. First reading and transmittal for ordinance number 2020-17. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning a future land use designation of mixed use to approximately 10.22 acres identified as Poffenbaugh, located east of Live Oak Boulevard, south of East Erlo Bronson Memorial Highway, providing for amending of the official future land use map of the comprehensive plan, filing of the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, applicability and effect, severability, cooperative file, and effective date. First public hearing and introduction for ordinance number 2020-18. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, assigning zoning district of mixed use compatible with mixed use future land use designation adopted by ordinance number 2020-18 for approximately 10.22 acres identified as Poffenbaugh, located east of Live Oak Boulevard, south of East Erlo Bronson Memorial Highway, providing for entering the designation of official zoning map, filing the Planning Commission's recommendations, proof of publication, severability, conflicts, and effective date.
Mr. Mayor may be recognized.
Mr. Anderson, yes, you may. You have the floor.
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is a voluntary annexation request for approximately 10 acres that is located south of Erlo Bronson and east of Hickory Tree Road. It is being submitted under the name Poffenbaugh. It meets the criteria under section 171.044 Florida statutes as it is contiguous and reasonably compact. And we received a signed petition from all property owners associated with this project. It is adjacent to the city limits on the northeast and on the northern side, eastern and western property boundaries. And the existing future land use in the county is commercial with a county zoning of CR commercial restricted. It is compatible with the surrounding area and there are no adverse impacts to city facilities at this time. The annexation is consistent with our growth management strategic plan goal, and staff and DRC recommends approval of ordinance 2020-16, and the Planning Commission at their meeting on June 16th also recommended approval of ordinance 2020-16 based on the 16 findings of the Land Development Code, and as the City Council do the same for this first reading of the annexation. The companion item to this is the future land use or comprehensive plan amendment change for the same property, 10.022 acres, which makes it a large scale plan amendment. And as such, this would need to be transmitted to the state for interagency review. The existing future land use on the property, as I said, is commercial, and the proposed future land use is for mixed use within the city. The allowable density for a mixed use would be anywhere between 5 to 25 dwelling units per acre, and non-residential uses ranging from 0.35 FAR to 2.5 FAR. It is compatible with the surrounding area, and there are no adverse impacts to services at this time. It is consistent with our growth management strategic plan goal. Staff recommends approval of ordinance 2020-17 and to transmit to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for interagency review. The Planning Commission at their meeting also recommended approval of Ordinance 2020-17 and to transmit to FDEO for interagency review. Lastly, the City Council do the same. The third item is the corresponding zoning map amendment, which would be consistent with the future land use change of mixed use. And this request is for a mixed use. And again, it is considered compatible with the surrounding area and there are no adverse impacts of services, consistent with growth management strategic goal. Staff recommends approval of Ordinance 2020-18. Planning Commission at their meeting also recommended approval of Ordinance 2020-18 and asked that the City Council would do the same. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is the developer or anyone representing him here to speak?
We have Jim Puffenbaugh in the audience.
Okay. Would Mr. Puffenbaugh like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Councilman and Chairman and Council. My name's Jim Poffenball. I live at 206 Connecticut Avenue, St. Cloud, Florida. I voluntarily applied to have 10.2 acres annexed into the city, also requesting a zoning change from commercial, which was the county zoning, to mixed use. I feel it will be good for the city from the tax base, the utility usage, and bringing some nice retail into the 192 Hickory Tree corridor there. I don't think there's a representative. I do have a contract on it with builder who I think is already working with the city, the building department, planning and zoning, or whoever. But I really can't tell you at this time exactly what's going to be there, other than I know it's going to be retail, and it will be conducive to the area and to all the surrounding properties. And I want to thank you all for your consideration, and I look forward to working with you all throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poffenbaugh. Madam Clerk, is there anyone in the audience, chambers, or online to speak to these items?
No, we don't have anyone additionally.
Then we'll have discussion, questions, or motion by council.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
I'm listening.
Second.
Are you making a motion for what? The adoption of the item 2020-16?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I'd like to do that. Make that motion.
All right. We have a second by Councilmember Askew. Was that correct?
Cooper. All right, I'll second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Can't even hear.
Sorry, I was reading the thing. So I have a question, I'm sorry, for Mr. Anderson. Would our codes now make the buildings be like up front on the right of way, don't they? And then the parking is behind it. I just keep seeing all the buildings being built along 192 and they're not built like that, where I thought that was like the new way to lay out the sites.
Ms. Hatini, that is correct. That is our preference and intent in the Narcousie overlay. That is laid out specifically. In our mixed use district, we have provisions in it to do that. Understand though that the areas that you're seeing buildings set back from the street are not mixed use. They are straight zoning, highway business, which does not have that provision. So that's why we recommend mixed use, to be able to require those setbacks being closer to the street. We can look at revisions to the zoning districts to include those types of provisions in them, ensure that we have buildings closer to the street.
I would like to see that because I thought that's the whole thing with the walkable community. Like you don't want people to have to walk down 192 and then walk through, you know, a half mile of parking lot to get back to a development. I mean, I know these tracks aren't that big, but I thought that was the whole day to create walkable communities to push them up to the sidewalk instead of having them have to come through the parking lot.
That is correct.
I would like to see that. I don't know how the other council members feel, but
This is a motion for annexation. You can bring that up in the next one.
Well, I'm bringing it up now, but I'm a yes for this.
Okay.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
Yes.
Councilmember Trace?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to item number 8, ordinance number 2020-17. Do we have discussion or motion regarding this ordinance?
So moved.
I have a question from Councilmember Trace, please.
Not a problem.
Kind of following in line with some of Deputy Mayor Matheny's questions as well. Andre, when does the applicant select a place type in the mixed use district?
They will need to come back with a conceptual master plan and a concept plan, and that's when they would identify the place types. Right now, this is just the base zoning on the property.
And does that come back before us, or is that staff approved?
The conceptual master plan is approved by council.
Okay.
Mr. Askew, you have a question?
No, I would second that motion though.
All right. Do I have a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 2020-17?
So moved.
Mr. Cooper.
We have a motion from Councilmember Cooper, a second from Councilmember Askew. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
Aye.
Councilmember Trace?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, could I also just ask for clarification? I apologize. This was the land use. You already did it. Never mind. The transmit.
All right. Do we have discussion and or motion regarding item number 9, ordinance number 2020-18? Ms. Matheny, you have your light off. Are you on to speak?
Nope.
Could I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve resolution 2020-18.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Trace, second from Councilmember Cooper. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Askew?
Aye.
Councilmember Trace?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to item number 10. Madam Clerk, will you please read that resolution into the record?
Mayor, I needed to clarify for the record what we decided on item 4, which is the first public hearing for 2020-11. I don't have a motion for that.
That was pulled by staff.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah,
that was pulled.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, will you read item number 10?
Resolution number 2020-059R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, granting a conditional use to operate an open air market use at 4211 and 4253 13th Street, St. Cloud, Florida, described the body of this resolution.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
It's my understanding that Abismail Abreu would be presenting this. I'm not sure if he's online. Yeah, he's online.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Abby.
Hey, Andre, can you also let me share my screen? I have the PowerPoint on mine.
Fine, I want to share.
Thank you.
First of all, would you state your name and address for the record?
There we go. All right, sorry for that. Good evening, City Council. My name is Abismail Abreu. I am the business navigator for the City of St. Cloud, and I am here to present Resolution 2020-059R. This resolution is for a conditional use on 4211-4253 13th Street to operate an open air market. A bit of background on this. We have a conditional use on a property that currently has a future land use designation of commercial on a highway business zoning district. And according to the Land Development Code, Table 7, an open air market is permitted on a conditional use in this zoning district. The development is consistent with the general pattern of the area, and city staff found no adverse impact on city public infrastructure on this conditional use. Along with our review, we found consistency with the strategic goals of growth management as well as economic development based on this conditional use. Both DRC and staff on or before March 13th of this year recommended approval of Resolution 2020-059R. The Planning Commission met last week on the 16th of June and also recommended approval of Resolution 2020-59R. And I am here virtually in front of you to request that the City Council also approve Resolution 2020-59R. I believe Ms. Linda Ryle, the representative from the farmers market, has been patiently waiting to answer any questions that you might have.
Is she here, would like to speak?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Linda.
Hi. Yeah, I'm willing to answer any questions you got. It's a very small farmers market. We're not impacting.
Could you state your name and address first, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Linda Ryle from 6680 St. Cloud, Florida. 6680 Bass Highway, St. Cloud, Florida. But it's a very small farmers market. We don't draw a lot of traffic. It's not like other farmers markets where they have food vendors that come and people come and hang out. They just stop, purchase what they're buying, and leave. So we don't draw a big group of people. You know, they come, buy what they want, and they leave. They're not hanging out. So we're not impacting other restaurants in the area or other businesses. I don't know. I can answer any questions you got. You pretty much know the story.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, is anyone in the chamber or online to speak to this item?
I have no one else present.
Thank you. We'll have discussion, questions, or motion by council. Councilmember Matheny.
Oops, thank you. I was happy to see this on the agenda. I know this was something that Ms. Miller was trying to work out for them quickly, but I'm glad to see we've got a formalized agreement. I just wanted to double check with Ms. Ryle that you're okay with all the terms and conditions that are in this agreement, because that's something, you know, I had some discussions with staff about that, but they had told me that you had read and were okay with all of the conditions.
As far as I know, I don't know of any conditions that, I don't know, is there something going on that I wasn't told about?
Well, the thing that I had a lot of conversation about was the business tax receipt. So any of the vendors that come out there are going to have a business tax receipt, which I think is around 60 some odd dollars. And so my concern when I was discussing it with staff was, you know, is this an unusual condition? You know, they said this agreement is unusual, but I was told that everyone who does business in the city of St. Cloud is to have a business tax receipt. I would express concern that, typically with farmers markets, sometimes people come in and out. Like, every week it's maybe different people, but she said that in her discussions, or not she, I don't know, staff said that in their discussions with you, that you're expecting it to be like the same folks every week. So just, that was my concern, was about the business tax receipt, but they had said that was all discussed with you.
We are not a transient market. We are the same people consistently. We got the same produce people, and then I sell homemade soap and 3B's honey. Occasionally there's a girl that comes. Basically, it's two of us there all the time. But there is someone that comes once in a blue moon that sells candles, someone that sells jams, and everybody does have their business license and stuff. But, we're willing to abide by whatever we got to do. But yeah, we don't have people that come and then don't come. So it's usually just the two of us.
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
Councilmember Askew.
No objections. Free advertising, 3B's honey, just saying.
Hey, my business is Soap Cloud, so I was advertising somebody else.
Would any other council members like to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. We go ahead and accept it.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval of resolution 2020-059R from Councilmember Cooper. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Councilmember Askew. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Trace.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper.
Aye.
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Brings us to council action. Item number 1, Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2020-133R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, amending the fiscal year 2019-2023 5-year consolidated plan and fiscal year 2019 annual action plan, and the Citizens Participation Plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program, providing for conflict, providing an effective date.
Thank you. Who do we have to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor, this is Andre Anderson.
All right. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. This is the resolution 2020-133R. This is the second time this has come before you. We voted before you at the last City Council meeting as an initial introduction for public input. It is related to the CARES Act, and it's to amend our 2019-2023 consolidated plan, our annual action plan, and also our public participation plan. Just by way of a quick background, this CARES Act was signed back in March, and it was designed to provide assistance to prevent, prepare, and respond to COVID-19. There were 3 different allocations, one at $2 billion from the federal government, another at $1 billion, and this third at around $2 billion. Our estimated funded from this allocation is $198,898. So as a consequence, we will need to amend our plan, as I said, which is our 5-year consolidated plan, and include the provisions related to the CARES Act so that we can distribute these funds. This table here provides a quick summary of our current allocation for our existing plan, and the items below in red is the additional allocations that we will be receiving that will provide for some additional programs related to the CARES Act. There's some provisions in this CARES Act that provides some exemptions and some extensions of deadlines. And while we are able to take advantage of the deadlines, we are still pressing forward in order to be able to utilize these funds sooner than later. So for instance, we can suspend the 50% cap on public services, and we're proposing 50% use of those funds. It also suspends in-person public hearings, and because of COVID-19, we're able to hold this public hearing in a virtual environment. As far as next steps, we have completed our comment period since June 11th till tonight, and we have not received any public input or comments on the proposed amendment. We will submit this to HUD, and as soon as HUD approves it, we'll be able to draw down the funds and be able to start allocating those funds to various recipients. This is consistent with our strategic goal for economic development and for growth management, and staff recommends approval of Resolution 2020-133R, and ask that the council approve this resolution tonight. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. I believe there is also my consultant online to answer any additional questions that I may not be able to answer. Yes.
Madam Clerk, do we have someone to speak to this?
I have no one in the audience or no one signed up for this item.
I see an Eric Chatham.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, he is my consultant that's available to answer questions.
Mr. Chatham, are you wanting to speak to this item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm just here to support Andre and answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you very much. We'll have discussion, questions, motion by council.
Motion to approve resolution 2020-113 or 133R.
And I will second that. We have a motion from Councilmember Trey, second by Mayor Blackwell. Madam Clerk, you call the roll.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Aye.
Councilmember Cooper?
Aye.
Councilmember Askew?
Aye.
Councilmember Trace?
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Madam Clerk, will you read the next resolution, please?
Resolution number 2020-134R, a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Cloud, Florida, making findings approving the Local Housing Assistance Plan, LHAP, as required by State Housing Initiative Program Partnership Program Act, subsections 420.907, 420.9079, Florida Statutes and Rule Chapter 67-37, Florida Administrative Code, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute any necessary documents and certifications needed by the state, authorizing the submission of the LHAP for review and approval of the Florida Housing Finance Corporations, providing for conflicts and providing an effective date.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Mr. Anderson, tonight's your night.
Thank you. Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. This is Resolution 2020-134R. It is the companion to Ordinance 2020-20, wherein you adopted the Housing Trust Fund for Affordable Housing and the Affordable Housing Program. This is the required local housing assistance plan that would be adopted and part of this program. I will dispense with all the background, but suffice to say that it is a 3-year housing plan, and there are 5 strategies that we've identified for this 3-year period, but which can be changed at any, can be amended. The first is purchase assistance, down payment purchase assistance without rehabilitation. We also have owner-occupied rehab, disaster assistance, rental assistance for tenants, and rapid rehousing to avoid homelessness. This will have to be approved by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, and will also be part of the local trust fund, wherein the funds will be deposited there. You will also have to establish an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which was mentioned in the previous ordinance. And within a year of this committee being established, they will need to develop some incentive strategies, such as expedited permitting, ongoing review process improvements, and inventory of public lands for affordable housing. These are examples of incentives that our local governments have initiated with the adoption of the LHAP. This table shows a breakdown of the allocated funding and the funding that will go to each program. So you'll see the percentage breakdown and the amount of shipped funding that will go to each strategy. for a total of $512,171 for this initial first year. The next steps in the program, of course, is to adopt ordinance 2020-20, which you already did. And now we would move forward with adopting this resolution submitted to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation for their approval. And then once that's approved, we would then begin to receive funding. It's consistent with our economic development strategic goal as well as growth management, and staff recommends approval of resolution 2020-134R, and ask City Council to approve resolution 2020-134R. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is anyone in the chamber or online to speak to this item?
No, I do not have anyone in the audience or online.
We'll have discussion and a motion by council. Councilmember Askew, your light's off.
My mic's off. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Speak.
Yeah, no worries. This is not an easy task to accomplish. I appreciate staff doing all this. I mean, I'm sure it's not a check and you just send it off. I give it a motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Trace. Do we have any other discussion or comments before I ask for the vote? If not, Madam Clerk, you call the roll.
Councilmember Cooper.
Aye.
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Councilmember Trace.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Brings us to item number 3. Mr. Sturgeon, I believe you have pulled this item.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. We'll be pulling that to a future date.
Thank you. That brings us to our city attorney, Mr. Manzares.
Just one quick item, and I'll let you give your information. The governor has extended the ability to use communication media technology for meetings until basically August 1st. So I just want to let you know, because we talked about this at the workshop the other day and how long it is. So you will be able to have the option of having these meetings like this. You have one more council meeting between now and then, but several other meetings that may come up. So we just want to let you know that probably, unless we receive any direction from the council to do otherwise, your meetings will be virtual between now and then.
Thank you, Mr. Manzares. Mr. Trace, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, I believe other cities were advertising that they would be kind of in both spots, or kind of online, or if it gets rescinded or doesn't get extended, in person. Are we advertising that way, or is that something we need to do once we get closer to August?
Probably something we'll need to look at once we get closer to August. As you know, we were working towards having this meeting in person, like a more traditional meeting. So we'll monitor it and we'll see what happens, but we will watch out for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Sturgeon.
I have nothing, Mayor.
Mr. Cooper.
If we could just go back to the lakefront and getting it asking Soto and the FWC, could we get a report back in the next day or two, whatever, Mr. Sturgeon, and whatever you can find out, and what direction they're going to do or what they're going to get finished?
We can certainly do that. Give me till Monday at 3 o'clock.
Well, that's quick. Okay. If you can do that, I appreciate that. Yes.
Yes, sir. We're already working on it. You can't see us.
Okay. Not a problem. Thank you, sir.
Is that it, Mr. Cooper?
That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Askew.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got one thing that's sort of going on with the city. I mean, I'll give you one example. Before I do that, though, our building staff and the permitting is just sort of crazy down there. And I'm not sure I guess it's a question for Mr. Sturgeon if we need more assistance down there or need some more help. But I was brought to my attention, it's right in front of our eyes on 821 Pennsylvania Avenue, there was building a building there, and one of the neighbors brought it to my attention. And I thought it was a garage. I went down, I looked at, well, actually, when
Hang on. Yes, sir.
we talked about
21.
probably a garage, but what ended up happening, it's a unit, it's 50 square feet, it's right across from Main Street. They have 4 units there. They're now building a 5th unit on a 50 square foot lot, brand new. And they made it as a, I think it's a remodel. I can't figure it out because I can't get the permits.
Who's that talking?
Mr. Cooper, you need to mute your mic, Mr. Cooper. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Askew.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So if you look at the property next to Main Street, 9th Street in Pennsylvania, it's 821. There is going to be, there's 5 units there now. One just got permitted. It's 2 feet from the lot next to them. I'm not blaming staff or anything for that, but just like, if there's a hole in this thing, what is the hole? We need to stop it. I really don't want that to go all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue on a 50-foot lot. We have 5 units. That's sort of ridiculous, and there's really no parking. So I was just flabbergasted because I went on, looked it up. It's 50-foot lot, and I'm like, well, there's nothing there. And I tried to explain to the citizen that this can happen, and then I really haven't gotten any resolution. It's considered a multifamily. It's an older house, but to build another lot with sewer, water, permitted, I don't blame the owner. I don't blame the staff, but whatever that hole is needs to be filled. And if you guys want to take a ride down there and take a look at it, that's a little crazy. So I'm just asking the city manager if he can look into stuff like that and try to figure out where this is happening. They pulled a permit, they got approved. And the permitting area, they're being slaughtered by the developing and everything else. So it might be I'm guessing it's a software issue, but please look at that. I really don't want that to happen to the rest of our state streets. And the lady that brought it to me, she's like, I want to build that in my yard. And I'm like, I really don't want that in your yard. So if you can take a look at that, that would be fantastic, Mr. Sturgeon. But again, I understand the overwhelmingness of this whole thing, but when it starts to come into all our backyards, and I know there's some other council that live down that area, and I really don't want that spreading through the rest of the state streets. It's 5 units on a 50-foot lot is ridiculous, really is. So if you can look at that, Mr. Sturgeon, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Askew. Make sure I'm on. I saw the head shaking, so I'm clear on the direction. Thanks for the email today. I have already spoke to the building official and the Growth Management Services Director to look into it, and I need some more clarification, but we will definitely look and find out what that, we'll call it, the hole in the process is.
Right, and there's something going on because they sort of made up their own address, 1079 9th Street. There's no such thing. If you look in the property appraiser, there's no such thing as that. So there's some, I don't know what's going on, some trickery or some way of figuring this out, but we really need to plug that hole because I can give you more examples, but I'll just leave it at that.
That's it. Do we have a consensus from the council that he look into that?
Yes, sir.
We got lots of yeses.
That's 5 heads shaking. I'm good with that.
Can we get that? Can we get that stopped, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
let's look.
We'll have to bring back a report and find out what the issue is. I doubt it, but it could be legal, and we'll bring back any recommendations.
All right.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Do you have anything else, Councilmember Askew?
No, I hate to leave on a negative note, but I'm not, because they did a great event on Saturday. It was fantastic. Some people that helped us out in the downtown, they were giving brand new bicycles. It was fantastic, and I appreciate the city support when it comes to all that sort of thing. So thank you for that. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Matheny.
I don't have anything. Have a great 4th of July.
Awesome. Councilmember Trace.
To follow up on Deputy Mayor Matheny's comment about should we have a workshop on that? City boundary, water boundary, all of that? What's our next step?
I need 3 of you to tell me to do it. I got 2.
And you got 5, so.
Absolutely.
So if I could, as you know, for the next couple of months, we'll be focused on budget. So I will, I'm thinking October. And we'll bring in some experts to talk about annexation, the pros and cons of it, and all those different things.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Trace? I guess not. I'd like to thank the city for the excellent job they did on their ribbon cutting and grand opening. I just want to echo again those sentiments. You guys did an excellent job, and it was a really neat event. And I did like the giving away of the bikes. That was a neat thing that was done. I've gotten some questions about people who can't use the marina. People asking for rebates, discounts. I would just like for the city, if I have the support of the council, to just look at maybe giving them a 1-month discount or 1 month compensation, not 3 months, but 1 month for all the challenges they've gone through, not being able to use their boats, not being able to have electricity there, not having water. And I would just like if you could bring it back to us, what that would be if we gave the people that stayed in the marina a 1 month compensation for putting up with all they've had to put up with down there. Would I have the consensus of the rest of the council for them to bring back at least a report of that? Any objections? Thank you. I got lots of thumbs up. Thank you.
Good. I'm clear.
Thank you. I don't have anything else. That brings us to our information section and report section. Thursday, July the 23rd, there will be a city council meeting at 6:30 again. Monday, July the 27th, there'll be a city council budget workshop at 6 p.m. Monday, July the 28th, there'll be a city council budget workshop at 6 p.m. if necessary. We have a proclamation in recognition of Parks and Recreation Month that was issued. We have a report, the warrants list number 14, available for your review. With that, there's no other thing.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Can I just, I don't know if it made it on the list, but we are planning on having a dependent special district meeting on July 16th. So look for that.
Okay, a DSD meeting on the July 16th.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, there's nothing else. We will consider this exciting meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Everyone have a good 4th.
Thank you.